I want to talk about unpaid work. Unpaid work must be distinguished from slavery, which, although outlawed throughout the world, still exists unofficially in totalitarian regimes. Even in Britain, where we consider ourselves so enlightened, there are immigrants who, after being lured here, have their passports taken away and work in slave-like conditions without pay. No, unpaid work should be something freely and willingly undertaken. It's a phrase which came into existence regularly in my lifetime. At first, it was used to emphasize the lack of recognition by society of work done in the home. For the most part, the expectation was that this was women's work. And in my childhood, as for many of my young friends over 70 years ago, mother was always at home, and it was father who was described as the breadwinner. It was he who went out to work and was paid for it. It was not until the 1960s, with the women's rights movement, that greater attention was drawn to this. With 2 world wars, women had begun to do work previously done by men. Yet to this day, there remains the great injustice that women generally do not receive equal pay for equal work. This is a big factor in determining that it is the woman who stays at home in any two-sex partnership. It's mainly in the Scandinavian countries that state welfare systems provide effective economic incentive to enable each partner to take a share in bringing up the children. For example, in Sweden, they may share 13 months paid leave with 78% of normal salary. In my day, in working class communities, there was no such thing as paid childcare or nursery schools. The grandparents are always a great help, but children deserve a close relationship with young parents. It may be controversial, but it's tragic that some women, in order to further their careers, choose to freeze their eggs. In my parents' time, there were often larger families. My mother was one of 5 sisters, and my father had 3 sisters and a brother. In each case, it was the youngest daughter who usually remained unmarried and was expected to stay at home to care for the elderly and possibly ailing parents. This still prevails in many families, but thankfully, it's a form of unpaid work that is now receiving more welfare and financial support. Thankfully, too, there is similar family support for the care of mentally and physically handicapped. Except in the most severe cases, such care is better in the home than in institutions. Public funds should be available to help voluntary organizations give moral encouragement, which is not the speciality of officialdom. However, the burden still often falls upon the woman. It's not too sentimental to describe such people as angels, or society would fall apart without them. What I've tried to describe is something characterized by love and affection. It's difficult to replace this kind of commitment by paid work. Even if the callous word institute has been replaced by care home, the voluntary aspect of care truly expresses humanity. This was outstandingly shown some years ago in Cardiff with the pioneering work of a student voluntary society. Students took into their group homes handicapped young people as residential guests for periods of respite care. It demonstrated that limited material considerations are more than compensated by the warmth of human kindness. It does not denigrate proper monetary reward to say that things done joyfully without thought of such reward are usually done well. That student social work activity is just one example in recent times of voluntary work which is indeed unpaid work of a serious and organized kind. Going back more than 100 years, there are examples of individuals like Dr. Thomas Bernardo and Lord Baden-Powell, who have inspired unpaid work down the years with children's homes and work with young people. In the same spirit, so much unpaid work is being carried out by long-established bodies like Rotary, TOC-H, the Red Cross, St. John Ambulance, Women's Royal Voluntary Service. These are just a few well-known names, amongst the myriads of church and religious organizations, sports clubs, cultural societies, charity fundraisers, political and campaigning groups. Nowadays, there's hardly a social or medical condition that does not have its support group. In 1981, when the coordinating body Interval published its directory, there were 125 such groups in the Cardiff district. Voluntary Community Service now has 130 similar member groups, and all in the area of unpaid work. We may be cynical when politicians occasionally praise such activity. Then there are the trades unions, which may need to be placated by understanding that it does not replace properly paid jobs. It is something unique that can never be paid for. Unpaid work must be seen at its best as something to be treated very seriously, and more than just a pastime or hobby. The individual may not think much beyond the particular piece of voluntary service concerned, but nevertheless, he or she is enriched by the process, which benefits the whole of society. Voluntary Community Service is a volunteer bureau which aims mainly to encourage such individuals. It has done much to provide a sense of worth, particularly amongst young people. It seems a good point to conclude. In a world which increasingly records the value of everything in terms of money, let's try to show that doing something unpaid can be the real measure of the good life.